Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're also recording this conversation and we'll post it later on our YouTube at BAF. I am Maya. I'm a PhD student at UCSB. I focus on Web3 sustainability space, and I also run BAF's Impact series events like this one, where we explore different applications of blockchain, kind of beyond traditional financial tools, mostly focusing on refi. And today I'm super excited to dive into the role of NFTs in climate action. And as our main speaker, we have Nihar, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ecosapiens, and we'll dive deeper into what Ecosapiens is. But sort of the purpose of this talk is to provide kind of a broader overview of what NFTs can and cannot do for fighting climate change, specifically use Ecosapiens as an example of how NFTs can be leveraged to help in this endeavor. And yeah, so it's even though I'm kind of moderating the conversation, it's an open discussion. So if anyone has a question at any point of this conversation, just feel free to request to speak, and then we'll put you up on stage. And so without further ado, thanks so much, Nihar, for being here. Do you want to just do a quick introduction? So what's your role? What do you do? And maybe just a little bit more of your personal background. Like, what did you do before joining Web3 space?
Yeah, sounds great, and thanks for having us, Maya. So I maybe come from a little bit more of a non-traditional background, both into Web3 and climate change. So I was in the venture capital industry for the last 6 years and worked at three different funds. And my passion was really kind of consumer technology. So that's like generally where I focused. And in 2020, I joined a firm called Menlo Ventures, and it's like a firm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, invests across enterprise, consumer, and just a number of emerging kind of trends. But I came in, looking at consumer, but I ended up going down the wormhole of climate change and climate tech. I think 2020 was a year of many realizations for the world in terms of that. I think like we've just entered the decade where we're seeing clearly the very obvious signs of human induced, climate change. And like I was in the Bay Area in 2020 when the skies turned orange because of the wildfires, right? And it literally turned into Mars. Conversely, I remember, people in LA, at the start of COVID when people stopped driving, for the first time ever, you could actually see the sky in LA go from gray to blue, right? Like it's because all the smog just disappeared overnight from all the cars. And so I was sort of noticing a bunch of trends. I'll just name two big ones. One is that consumer sentiment hit like a new inflection point in 2020 and has continued to rise ever since. The second one is that renewable technologies and just climate technology, like heavy industry climate technologies, came down the cost curve significantly over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So like, solar energy, solar panels, renewables in general are cheaper here on a kilowatt per hour basis in the United States and the EU than a fossil fuel or a fossil burning plant, right? And now, anytime anyone says, "Oh yeah, we gotta bring back coal," it actually just doesn't make economic sense, right? And that's the thing. It's like people are not necessarily married to gas guzzling cars or um, to energy made from fossil fuels. It's just that, when consumers and when society is looking for utility, they just want the better, faster, cheaper option, right? And so for the first time in history, the better, faster, cheaper option in terms of energy was just, renewable based energy, right? And, as it relates to this project, the whole area that I just got really obsessed by was the relationship between consumers and the environment, right? And I just found it really fascinating that whenever you talk to any consumer on the planet, or anyone in the room, or even people in this spaces, for example, if they care about the planet, they're going to say, "Of course, are you kidding me?" And then if you ask them if that they do the basics, right, recycle, compost where they can, they're like, "Yeah, I do the best that I can." but what can I do to have more of an impact? Like I try to bring, a reusable bag when I go to the Whole Foods, or I try to shop organic, and like if I can afford it, I'll go for plastic free clothes, or hell, I'll even thrift, right? And these are the small things that everyday people are doing, but there is this big thirst out there for wanting to do more. And the whole thing that I believed was that I believe fundamentally that a big and great company exists to service that thirst to make an impact. And that's kind of like the basis for Ecosapiens is, we're trying to build a platform to make climate action possible for anyone. And our core thesis is that we think we can pick apart large segments of consumer categories, and if we can align them with what's impactful and positive for the planet by making the impactful choice one click easy, financially attractive, and culturally relevant. And as it relates to Web3, like the whole thing that I was trying to look for was like, what's a really good wedge to kind of building this company? And that's how I kind of came across this idea of taking carbon, bringing it on chain, and then productizing it specifically onto NFTs, and not just tokens, specifically NFTs, and then leveraging both the personality and the charisma and the community layer of NFTs to make like the perfect digital piece of art and build a community around it that's climate conscious. And so that was kind of the original idea for Ecosapiens, and there's a reason why we call it Ecosapiens, right? Because we are on a mission to enable Homo sapiens to become Ecosapiens in the future, and this NFT is basically the gateway to what we call the Ecoverse and that whole mission. Um, each of our NFTs comes with 20 tons of carbon-based removal credits that are Silvera rated. So when you buy our NFT, quite literally, you're offsetting your entire year and more. So it's kind of like saying I did my good for the year. It's that carbon negative. And then we'll actually productize the car. We'll actually enable you to evolve your character over time by sequestering more carbon, and enabling you to make it more increasingly more rare. So just like a Pokemon, you can make your character more unique and more rare and more beautiful by sequestering more carbon. And so this is kind of like the world's first, not only carbon, like truly carbon backed NFT because you own the carbon, but also the first carbon backed avatar that you can continue to upgrade by sequestering more carbon. And yeah, that's kind of our initial product, and that's kind of what brought me into Web3. But really, like I was saying, I think for us, with respect to Ecosapiens, our big mission really is to create a platform to make climate action possible for anyone.
Wow, that was a great overview of what Ecosapiens is, and I would definitely gonna dive into some specifics. Where you mentioned cultural significance and the ecoverse, but before we get into those particularities and what makes Ecosapiens unique, I kind of want to like take a step back and like look at the big picture because you also wrote this Refi 101 guide recently, which I think does a really great job kind of mapping out the whole regenerative finance space, which is very much needed, I feel like, because we hear about the refi, and very few people actually kind of map out the big picture of what it consists of. So, can you maybe kind of quickly provide your take on refi? Like, what is refi 101? Briefly, and maybe also specifically, where do NFTs fall in this ecosystem, and why you early mentioned earlier that you specifically chose NFTs over, a fungible token. So why NFTs? So refi 101, the role of NFTs within refi, and why.
Yeah, so in my view, and there's many different opinions and views kind of on regenerative finance. That's what refi stands for. But for me, refi is essentially the idea of pricing natural assets for their value as carbon sinks. So a piece of land today, there's kind of two ways. Let's just take like a hectare of forest, right? And let's just say it's like fir or Douglas fir, trees. There's kind of two ways to look at it. Economically speaking, the way we look at that patch of land today is what's the economic value derived from turning into something economically productive. And the way you do that today is saying, okay, well, if we cut down all these trees and then turn it into grazing land, what's the value of that timber, and then what's the value of turning into grassland for cattle, right? There is some economic value to that, and that's actually primarily the reason why we continue to deforest, the rainforest, right? Is because that's the only way we think we can gain economic value from it. And so that's the system that we've lived in since, basically, the beginning of like modern economics, right? It's you extract resources from land, you turn it into you turn it into some type of production value, and then you sell it, you make a profit, and that's that. So regenerative finance basically flips it and says, okay, what's the value of keep preserving this hectare of land and not turning it into timber or not turning it into cattle? Grassland for cattle. And over time, like the reality is, there have been people that are buying this thing called carbon, right? So like you can value that same hectare of land for its value in terms of its carbon sequestration, which like I think everyone in this room knows we actually have to be in the business of sequestering carbon. We've actually, this is like a small side note, but we've actually created so much carbon, so much carbon emissions that even if we were to get to quote unquote zero emissions from everything, right, from air travel to manufacturing, hospitality, construction, you name it, the whole internet, even the blockchain, we actually still need to recapture like 10% of all the man-made human emissions, which is insane. So I like, this is the side note, but I actually think that there is like a multi-trillion-dollar company out there that needs to exist to capture carbon, direct air carbon capture, by the way. But sorry, to get back to kind of what I'm saying, regenerative finance is basically saying, here's a way for us to price natural assets for its value as carbon sinks, and let's do that over the blockchain. And that's what, the first layer of kind of the regenerative finance, the regen networks, the Noris, the flow carbons, the toucan coins, they're actually taking these carbon assets and they're bringing them to the blockchain and making them accessible to anyone so that there is a buyer's market for these things. Because look, if you own this hectare of land, you can turn it into carbon credits, but there has to be a buyer for it. And so that's kind of what this infrastructure layer of regenerative finance is trying to do. And as it relates to NFTs and tokens, metaverse, DAOs, those are quote unquote kind of like the application layer of this whole schema. Um, like if you were to buy like a meta tree, for example, or a sapling, or some of NF trees, there's a bunch of great NFTs in the space. A lot of them do have this model of you buy this thing and it's like it offsets some carbon or it plants a tree. I think NFTs are really interesting. Like your question about the tokens versus NFTs is really interesting. I don't think that carbon by itself creates any value for consumers. So if you're a consumer and you're saying, okay, like if can I buy carbon on my Robinhood app? You can't, by the way. But even if it did exist, like why would you buy it? Because you're altruistic, sure, but like that's not going to move the needle in terms of mass adoption. But if you can sell carbon that's maybe packaged as, or sell impact rather, it doesn't have to just be carbon. It could be just impact in general. If you can deduce it down to just art or story or community, that's kind of where I believe consumers can gain utility from carbon, right, or from impact. It's not necessarily, and that's how you get the people that are more than just altruists. That's how you get the people. That's how you get billions and billions of users, in my view. And that's really what NFTs present that tokens don't. It is like art, it is culture, it is community. And there is this great saying that Maya Angelou has this great quote that everyone knows, but people will never remember what you say, but you'll always remember how you make them feel. And I think that's what NFTs do that tokens can't.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I literally have this quote in like one of my very old Instagram posts. I love that quote. Um wow, okay, there's so much I want to um dive deeper into, like what you mentioned, like first little side note on the billion-dollar company. Well, I mean, carbon capture is a pretty complex technology, and I'm not even sure um how effective existing forms of carbon capture are. Well, I guess there's hope for better technology over time.
Well, the funny thing is the technology exists. It's just not scaled. Okay, this is another nerdy quote that I have. It's not my quote, obviously, but it's from something Gibson. He's a sci-fi writer, but he says the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed, and it's a fantastic quote because I think it describes a lot of how tech tends to work. Right, like solar energy or solar panels were invented because of NASA, right, for space flight over 50 years ago, and it's only now come down the cost curve enough so that it can be deployed everywhere, right? And that's kind of that's how I view direct air carbon capture too. Like we're actually they're actually installing the world's largest direct air carbon capture facility in Wyoming. The construction for that's about to begin right now, and I think the cost to capture 1 ton of carbon from DAC, it's north of 600 US dollars, right? So if you're actually going to be so like the price of carbon is, depending on the type that you have, it's going to be anywhere between 10 US dollars, 50 US dollars, maybe even more. And so for that to be a viable economic business today, either the price of carbon has to go up, or the price of like the cost to capture that carbon has to go down. Both are going to happen, right? So the cost to capture carbon directly from there is going to go down at scale, but I also do believe that the price of carbon has to go up. So somewhere in between the price of carbon today and the price of direct air capture, which is north of $500, like you could say somewhere in the 200s. I think that's when direct air capture will be really economically viable. When will that happen? I don't know. I mean, it could be 10 years. It could take more. My kind of like Hail Mary, kind of view on this is that I have a feeling that at some point, this climate crisis is going to get so bad that we start to just invest hundreds and billions of dollars to install these things like fans on top of or not fans, sorry, at like air conditioning on top of buildings globally. Seriously. If we actually have like a massive global effort, we can make direct air capture work. It's just, today it's just not economically viable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and actually, kind of going back to again NFTs and what they can do in the space. Can you maybe also like lay out? I love how you can like tie art and utility to what people want and how that actually be usable. What are other ways, like what makes Ecosapiens different from other NFTs in the space? Like you mentioned, NF trees. What makes Ecosapiens unique in the kind of NFT climate space? Is there some sort of like classification maybe of different functions that NFTs can play in this industry?
Yeah, so like our NFT is actually the underlying technology functions exactly like a token, right? So like when you buy a Nori token or you buy like a GNT from Flow Carbon or I forget what Toucan calls theirs. The underlying technology is exactly the same. So we are actually underpinning carbon to the NFT. So when you as a buyer buy an Ecosapien, you actually own that carbon. The ownership transfers over to your wallet and to your address, and that I believe is actually the really unique piece. That's one thing. The second thing is we're underpinning 20 tons of carbon to it, which is almost twice the typical American's annual emissions. So when you buy this thing, it literally is I offset my whole year and some. That's also never been done, right? So most tokens that exist, they typically try to underwrite 1 ton of carbon to it. So you just have to buy like one token equals 1 ton, but each Ecosapien can actually have a varying amount of carbon to it. So you may mint it with 20 tons, but we're actually letting you upgrade it and evolve your character to make it increasingly more rare, just like NBA Top Shot or CryptoKitties. So this actually becomes more like an avatar, and it's kind of productizing carbon in a unique way. You may start off with 20 tons of carbon, but to evolve it, we're forcing you to buy more carbon. Say 20 more tons to get to the next level, 20 more tons to get to the next one. We actually envision a story where you could own one of our Ecosapiens. Sorry, let me rephrase that. You become an Ecosapien by buying one of these, and you could over time sequester like 300 tons of carbon, all underwritten to that same NFT. That's actually like that's really important here because you can continue to upgrade year over year if you want to stay net zero for or not. Yeah, if you want to stay net zero for the year. Um, did I answer your question? I think part of what you were asking was how that relates to other NFTs too. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our I don't believe like in altruism at scale. I think it's nice. I think I try to do my best where I can, but I don't believe altruism scales. I think you actually have to create something that gives people utility. And I think what people want when they secretly think about impact, I think the best way to get people onto it is virtue signal. So if you look at the number one reason why people buy Teslas or Patagonia, it has nothing to do with it being eco-friendly or zero emissions. It's entirely because people want to be part of the Elon Musk halo and this futuristic image, and that I did something great, and this is something that you want to show off. Like, how many people that wear Patagonia are actually rugged outdoors people that care about the planet? Um, it's a lot of Wall Street guys, seriously. And but that's kind of my point here, is that the utility people are getting from impact a lot of times, even philanthropy, like, why do people donate to charities? I think it's one, people donate to charities because, like I said, it's a virtue signal. Two, it's to be part of this network of other interesting people. Three, you save some money on taxes. And four, okay, like, I really, there is a cause that I care about. um, like, I think that's how you get millions of people. And I'm not saying that people, don't, that there aren't people that are, donating because of their own good. I'm just saying that if you want to get billions of people, you have to, like, wrap up impact in a way that gives them utility. And that's kind of what makes NFTs really interesting, right? Because if you can make it about great art, if you can make it about community, I think that's where you can get utility for people. And also the fact that it's a tradable asset, and if you can, I think NFTs obviously exist partially to speculate. So if you can make it like the perfect virtue signaling NFT, I think, and you bring in a great name artist, I think you can get people to pay a lot more money for it. And because they want to show off, as opposed to that, not necessarily because they're having as much impact. And, like, let me be clear, like, I'm not trying to be like, we exist to make impact possible. This is just like my very pragmatic view on how we get there.
I appreciate your honesty. And I mean, yeah, I mean, oftentimes we see people donating billions of millions of dollars, right? But they want to, a university campus to be named after them, right? They don't just donate, they also want this like little placard
Yeah,
that
what's wrong with
says,
that, right? There's like,
yeah.
how many Carnegie halls are there? Seriously, it's
Yeah, and I really appreciate that in your in the white paper for Ecosapiens, you kind of it really reads like a story. So, and I think like I really appreciate kind of the importance of storytelling in how you explain the value of the project. And I also really appreciate the emphasis on cultural significance, because I feel like oftentimes in the especially like high techy world, it's missing. But you also in that white paper talk about how we don't see much of like individual climate action due to lack of affordability, right? Yet you use example, well, it's like it's pretty expensive to offset your flight here and there. And I guess I'm pointing to pricing, and like you're saying, all these unique features that Ecosapiens will have, like increase variability and like buy more carbon. I assume that's going to also drive the price up. So how can you um, promote kind of large scale climate action by kind of selling a pretty I'm predicting a pretty expensive NFT? How do you solve for affordability?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you know, I have mentioned this a few times, that we really do want to build a platform for people at scale, but we're taking like the Tesla Roadster approach. And so we are starting off with what is a premium, NFT, that's, really beautiful, has a lot of carbon. I mean, when I think about the cost of our NFT, and you're right, it's going to be somewhere between zero point 0.5 and 1 ETH. But the unique thing here is that we're actually just diverting your money to carbon that you own, that we can basically guarantee that floor price. So it's actually kind of like a really clever way of just moving your money to from cash or from ETH into a commodity that's relatively stable. So that's one thing. So I wouldn't look at the high price tag of our NFT necessarily as net money out your pocket. I would view it as like an investment. That's the first thing. The second thing is, like, just like, with the Tesla Roadster, like, I mean, the whole point of starting off high end is that we can bring in all the right people, the right influencers, the right business people, the right like from the industry, and the right philanthropists. We want to bring in the right people first that can help create the reputation and establish the value of the community. And then you can kind of branch off and do a bunch of other collaborations. So just like, Bored Apes or the Crypto Punks, they got really big and really expensive, and they built a very high net worth community. Once you sort of have that, I can totally see Ecosapiens doing collaborations with other sustainability companies. like an Adidas or like a Patagonia or just other sustainable brands. And I don't want to name names, but we are talking to a few of these, some of these brands. There is a story where, you go to the checkout line and you're buying a plastic free shoe, for example, and it says, hey, you're already doing a really good job by buying this specific type of shoe. Why don't you double down on your impact with an Ecosapien NFT that's underwritten by significantly less carbon than 20 tons? Obviously it would be like, zero point 0.1 or zero point 0.2 or whatever that product is. And not only do you get to make your whole purchase carbon negative and double down on your impact, but you can join a very unique community here, of people that have the same shared value as you. And this could be something that we build with that same brand, for example, and acts as like a loyalty and a community program, rewards for that person. Um, that's so one answer is it can be a POS solution that you see at all the right retailers. That's something that we've been discussing a lot. And I think that's kind of the way in which you see it grow. Like you aren't actually seeing people click the offset your flight or offset your whatever because it's just a cost center to you. But if you can basically say you can offset by buying an NFT that brings you into community and makes you look cool, I think that's actually how we get to like the millions and millions of people over time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Your like consumer focused philosophy behind it, and like, speaking of actually like carbon, um, and the carbon credits that Ecosapiens are backed by. How do you and I'm pretty sure you say it's like high quality carbon or some sort of like there's a lot of criticism within the carbon credits space, how not all carbon credits are truly impactful or high quality. So how do you ensure that Ecosapiens are backed by high quality carbon? What methodologies do you employ for that?
Yeah, so one is just like our criteria. So we're only looking for nature-based carbon removal credits, and probably to start just specifically reforestation. We're not necessarily like attached to any specific broker. Like we actually haven't become a partner with anyone there specifically yet. But irrespective of who we work with, and we're obviously in touch with all the players there. We want to make sure that these credits are independently rated by Silvera or B0, because we just trust their methodology and that they'll be an independent ratings agency irrespective of the supplier or the type or the whatever. And so that's really kind of our best answer there, is that we're going to go by independent ratings, that come from Silvera or B0.
And do you work with any other like refi carbon registries or plan to? Or do you mostly work with kind of a what they call Web3 legacy
No, we
institutions?
haven't. We've met all of them, and we have a bunch of great friends, but we haven't partnered up with anyone there specifically yet. I think the whole thing for us, Maya, is like when you connect your Ecosapien, with your wallet. Once you own one, we want to be able to explicitly show you the project that it's underpinned by, and that's like a visual thing, and it's a transparency thing, and it's a quality thing. But we actually do want that level of like visibility, because that's how it helps us ensure that we're making an impact. But also, it's just a good consumer experience. So like you buy the NFT, and then at a dinner party, you could maybe show people what the project is too. That's kind of the experience we want it to be like.
Yeah, totally. And actually, speaking of experience, and kind of, you already mentioned that you are building something more than just, these beautiful NFTs. Can you talk more about Ecoverse, like what it is? What do you mean by it? How is it different from Metaverse? And yeah, so how is it? What's your vision behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think ecoverse is more of a marketing term. I think I think really like our big vision is enable people to live their most sustainable life, and hence Homo sapien to Ecosapien. And it doesn't just have to be like a Web3 or metaverse thing. I think we want to basically get into all aspects of your life: how you move, how you eat, how you spend, and like reimagine these categories through the thesis I was just saying, by aligning impact and making it one click easy, financially attractive, and culturally relevant. Right. So one of our biggest ideas that we actually very much want to do, um, like as like a fast follow, is an Amex for sustainability. So one of our team members was very early at a company called Brex that, I think it's worth over $12 billion now, and it's like one of the most well known corporate, credit cards. It's like an Amex essentially. But I actually think we can create a very elite, black card type experience that gives you rewards and loyalty with every sustainability, as every eco-friendly brand on the planet. So that way, perhaps if we partner up with, sustainable food, or like Beyond Meats or Impossible Foods, Patagonia's, whatever these categories are. Imagine if you can just get discounts or rewards with these places, and in a very subtle way, maybe we can direct you as a consumer to lower your carbon footprint by shopping at these places. But for you, it's just you're saving money with great brands. That's one. That's one thing. The other thing is we are thinking of ways for you to maybe get points back in carbon as well on each transaction, as opposed to just points that are just points. So that's another thing that we're thinking through. But that's kind of the whole thing. Like the ecoverse really is just a term to say, once you become an ecosapien, like all the products that we want to build are part of this thing that we're calling the ecoverse or the eco suite. And it just exists to enable you to live the most sustainable life possible across a number of categories.
Really interesting how you're planning to kind of interconnect all these spheres of life. And you mentioned one of your team members, and I'm curious, like, what are some of the people behind this project? So can you talk a little bit more about your team, and also how is your governance set up? Like, are you more of a kind of a traditional company, or are you planning to have a DAO? How is this governance going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, so I can brag on my team like all day. So my co-founder Garrett Kane, he's an acclaimed artist and creative director who has worked at places like Saatchi and Saatchi, Gray, Publicis, McCann, all the great kind of ad firms. He spent a decade literally making Super Bowl ads, many of which you may have seen actually. He's won awards at Cannes and a number of amazing places. And his whole practice basically explores the intersection of humanity, technology, and environment, and the tension that occurs between these three elements. And his sculptures have been featured at Flatiron, Art Basel, all these places. He's actually like he comes from the world of fine art, and when I met him, it was just so obvious to me when I saw his sculptures that this was exactly like the type of like if you just got to look him up. Garrett Kane, by the way. I think his website's garrettkane.com or org or whatever. But or just follow him on Instagram, obviously. But he is like one of the few people in the world that is not only creating environmental art that is in the shape of like humanoids, which I think really matters, for PFPs and just for NFTs today, but he's actually writing sci-fi. And that's how I actually got to know Garrett, was actually through some of his early writing. He actually has a whole thesis around, or a whole screenplay-ish, you could say, around these creatures that come out and exist to heal different biomes on the planet. And those are what we call like the ecosapiens, right? And that's why we have a Leo sapien and an octosapien, yada yada yada. So Garrett is not only making our art, but he's actually building this like fictional universe for the Ecosapiens. And it's, we just released our graphic novel last week, actually, at least the prologue of it. And chapter one will be coming out really soon. So there is a whole storytelling NFT piece to what we're doing. And that's entirely Garrett and, his vision, which I think is, one of a kind. We also have Nico on our team, who is our community and growth superstar. He joined us as an intern, actually, 6 months ago. He's a student at Harvard, and he was also a TikTok star that built a platform of over 1 million followers. And so, like we don't like, it's generally speaking, as interns are kind of hard to have at startups, but the fact that he had built this whole platform, and look, you don't get to 1 million subs overnight or randomly. It's a persistent, dedicated effort, and it's systematic. And we figured, okay, like if he could come over here and if he could help us build that up, then that would be amazing. And we did. We brought him on here, and he's absolutely crushed it. I think we're like the fastest growing and number one climate NFT community today. We literally went from zero to, I think, what now, like 7,000 Twitter followers in like a bear market, um, on zero spend. Like we spent nothing. It's just brute force community building. And at the end of the summer, he actually came to us and said, I'm interested in dropping out of Harvard for the time being. What do you say? And we said, yeah, we're in. And so now Nico's literally our growth and community person. Our lead engineer and I'm not going to name his name because he prefers to be pseudonymous or not. Yeah, one of those two. And he is just like the triple crown of engineers. He, went to UCLA, worked at, started off his career at Meta slash Facebook, whatever you want to call it, and then went over to Blend at the Series B, which is a large fintech company. It went IPO. Then he joined this company called Brex even earlier than that as like employee 25, I believe, and was there when it was just a handful of people and making a few $100,000 in revenue, all the way to being the $12 billion behemoth today. And it was really simple. Like people ask us, how do you get him to come build here? And it was like, hey, we make art that makes the world better, and this is just an entry point into this bigger vision of enabling anyone to make an impact on the planet. And so it really was the mission that brought him here, and actually everyone into the team here. So we have an environmental storyteller, we have the perfect growth, the growth hacker, and we've got the triple crown of engineers. And that's kind of our team. It's just four of us, super lean. So that's on the team side. We are traditionally structured. So we did raise equity earlier this year, and we have some amazing, tier one VCs to back us. We have, our round was led by Boost Ventures. We have Slow Ventures, Menlo, CRV, and several others. And it's equity financing, and we do foresee that we will be continuing to do more equity financing. There is a story where we might create a token for DAO purposes or for proof of regeneration, but I just don't have a view on that yet. I think if I mean, like I was saying with our story, we didn't get into Web3 NFTs for the sake of being in Web3 NFTs. It was because we have this big halo of a mission, and we thought that this was the right way to go about servicing that mission, at least from a starting point. And so, to do all the things that we want to do, I don't know if being a traditional, Web3 token company is the way, but it could be. We're just not sure yet.
Wow, okay, sounds like a dream team, and I feel like we need to have Nico here at some point. It's one of our next events talking about how to build community in Web3 space. And speaking of not to not to point to you, Nico, but like speaking of students in the space, and we at BAF are very much student oriented and student run as an organization. What can can you recommend to students and young leaders in the space who want to be involved in let's say, well, specifically for this talk and if climate action space? What can you recommend to some of the students listening right now?
Yeah, I think if I were to recommend anything to students that are interested in Web3 or refi, it's one, don't do it because you think it's cool or because it's like the in thing to do. Like really be in it for the mission, and because like working at a startup is not easy. You're basically underpaid and you're overworking yourself. And Web3 itself is like a whole different level of commotion. It's just total insanity. You really have to be there because your soul is in it. That's like rule number one. Rule number two is when you try to find a company that you want to work for or get to know more, make sure that you really believe in the leadership there and that they have a really good window into what the future of the company is like. And that if they're people that you can see yourself learning from, that's really the second thing is like, don't discount the team. It's super, super, super important. And then three, get ready to just jump in and hustle. Like, I think, we didn't have a quote unquote formal position that said, hey, we're looking for interns or whatever. It's Nico just cold emailed us and said, I read the white paper and here's my background. Here's what I could do for you guys if you gave me a shot. And obviously you don't have to pay me much or at all. Blah blah blah. And like, what do you say? And I think honestly, that's how I kind of got my first start too. When I was in college, like I just started cold emailing people. This was years ago, obviously, but there is a certain hustle that I see from people that do know how to write a good cold email and do know how to get their foot in the door at exciting companies. It's not easy because most startups don't have the time necessarily to run a proper internship. But I think if you can hustle your way and show that you have real grit and if you can add value, I think you'll get in.
Yeah, these are really helpful steps. Thank you. And also, I don't want to be too dominant with my questions, even though I have a lot more I want to ask. I want to remind the audience it's an open conversation. If you have a question in mind or a comment or want to contribute to the conversation, feel free to request to speak and we'll bring you up to the stage. And in the meantime, I kind of want to like the last area I wanted to touch on is some challenges and criticisms because it's not just all rosy picture of NFTs are going to save the world. So how do you address some of the common criticisms? And I mean, like to name a few would be like, oh, NFTs are just overpriced JPEGs, and also in the case of Ecosapiens, I can, foresee something like, well, it's kind of a more of an elitist community rather than kind of climate oriented space. How do you address some of these criticisms?
Yeah, it's funny because I was on the phone with someone from the New York Times not that long ago, talking about kind of NFTs and just Web3 and the environment. And it was a unique experience for me because I think for people in Web3, specifically in refi, we all kind of recognize that it's actually a very unique opportunity to leverage tokenomics to, alter behavior and make, the regenerative choice or the lower carbon choice more attractive. I think we all know that from a theoretical level. But I think for the masses, there is still this image of like the Elon Musk tweet that is like, Bitcoin and crypto uses as much energy as this whole country, right? And I think the actual stat is that cryptocurrencies or blockchains today use as much energy as the entire United Kingdom and some other country. I forget what it is exactly, but there is a lot of misinformation out there. I think that's the big reality. When Ethereum went to POS, just a week or 2 weeks ago, they published their report. When they benchmark ETH POS usage compared to a number of other technologies out there, it's pretty remarkable. Basically, all of the Ethereum network today on POS, you'd have to multiply Ethereum's usage by 1,000 times to match that of Netflix's energy usage per year. And then you have to double that to get to YouTube's energy consumption per year. It's pretty insane. But when you tell people that, there's still just a lot of misinformation, right? Some people just don't want to hear it. Some people and we see it in our tweets, by the way. People definitely tweet us and they're like, how is this? NFTs don't seem to be the solution to climate change. Fuck you. Like we've seen that, and that's not going to go away though because some people are just not going to listen to the facts, and it's an emotional question. Actually, is probably the better way to think about it. Which is why I think NFTs get interesting, right? Because maybe tokens are like okay, tokens are could be perceived as speculative instruments or whatever. But NFTs, because they've got this visual element to it and this community element to it, I think you could probably, you know, um, I think you can actually perhaps get more people involved in refi through NFTs than just like tokens per se. And that's kind of my view. It's not the best answer, Maya, but I do think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Every time I've tried to educate people on it, I realize it's more of an emotional thing than it is like hey, I actually want to get educated on it. Um, yeah, so that New York Times article never came out. Long story short.
Oh, bummer. I was curious to read it. Yeah, I mean, I totally see the emotional aspect of it, and also like the way you frame it. The question of energy consumption is also the question of like what do you like? Question of values, right? Do you like gaming, or do you think there's more inherent value in like um uh, banking, the bank the unbanked, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and so what are some of the challenges do you see still for the NFT carbon backed NFT ecosystem moving forward? Besides these some of these criticisms, what are some of the challenges on the ground that you're are working uh, through?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also, um, I think there is maybe this public perception of like, so I have this great slide. I could probably share this or publish this later, but when you think about NFTs and just in consumer markets in general, they tend to be winner take all. Like, it's unlikely that you'll see look for all the copycats are of like different monkey photos. There's only really one collection that really matters in that whole metaverse kind of space, and it's the bored apes and the mutant apes, and it's all part of the Yuga family. Doodles, you could also say, is like metaversey, but it's more pop culture. It's Pharrell Williams. Some of these are built off celebrities and their reputation. I think in climate, like, or in eco friendliness, or whatever you want to call this like category in refi, there's like 50. I think we've mapped out 40 to 50 different NFT collections out there. And it can get kind of confusing, I think. Like if you're someone that's just kind of entering this space and you're saying what are the cool NFTs out there, I would imagine it's pretty hard to kind of figure out. Like there are so many cool ones, and I think that for us people in refi, it's very easy for us to distinguish what the nuances are and what how different the communities are, the value system, the artistry, the whatever. But I can imagine you being an outsider coming into the space and saying like, oh, they all look the same, right? And so I do think that there is like a possibility to build, more of a network, and there's already a lot of collaborations in the space, but I do feel like there is something a little bit more horizontal that might need to be created. I'm not sure what that is. I know there's several DAOs that have the possibility of doing that, but I do think that the space can be confusing, and that could be, one area that might need to get abstracted away over time. That's just my view, though. It's probably not right, but I can imagine it being confusing for people. Um, but they are so different, right? Like some NFTs are marine, for like marine or like animal conservation. That's part of, you could say it is regenerative, or maybe not regenerative, but it is like, nature, con, what's the right word? Like nature protection, you could say. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on. I could just see it being confusing for people. Oh,
I
okay.
feel like
Actually, the biggest confusion, I'll just say the biggest confusion is what is carbon. That's got to be the biggest confusion. Like forget Web3, forget NFTs. Like what is carbon? That's actually a whole problem that like carbon markets, carbon whatever. That's its own perplexing machine, obviously, and it's not as regulated as it should be.
yeah, totally. And again, yeah, the carbon marketplaces and what again, like how do we actually make sure there is real impact on the ground? Who does all these verifications? I think is a big question before it even comes to NFTs, right? And I mean, and it's exciting to see more and more organizations and smart, bright people working on that. So that's cool. And I feel like confusion is an understatement. It's the space is growing and becoming more and more complex. So there definitely needs to be some sort of a yeah something horizontal. What you talk about, I totally agree. And yeah, and sort of like on this note, like what's next for you for Ecosapiens? What are you currently working on? What should we look out for? And like, what's the timeline? When can we see this ecoverse coming together?
So we just opened up our pre-mint. So if you want kind of what is our early access pass to the Ecoverse and kind of all the future products that we're coming up with, it's a free mint, by the way. It we and I can share the link. I don't know where I can share the link, but is Nico, if you're on here, maybe there's a way to put it up on our website or in our Discord or something. But
What's
we do
this?
have
Yeah,
a
I can pin it up here or just send it to somebody.
okay, cool. Yeah, so we have a pre-mint. Get on it. We only have 250 spots. I will admit and say that someone leaked it, and we got like 3,000 signups overnight, which is like super frustrating, but also kind of cool. But if you get the link, sign up there and like put your email with like a real email, and then we'll be able to tell or add your email and say that you were in the BAF, you know like this call or whatever, and we'll be able to give you the access pass. We will be and from those 250, a subset of those will be invited to mint the actual NFT, which we will drop in December of this year. So somewhere in between the Thanksgiving and Christmas time. And kind of as like that's when the infrastructure will actually be ready, but also it's just like yeah, this is the NFT that keeps on giving, and I think it's just a great story for that time of the year, and it's a great gift. So that's what we'll be doing. Um, and every month after that, on the month, we will be doing more drops. So it'll be like a slow rollout, and yeah, that's kind of the first step. And yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff that we're doing behind the scenes here that we're just like not allowed to talk about for now.
not publicly at least.
Yeah, keep the intrigue going. Oh wow, exciting! Just in time for holidays, and we're approaching kind of the end of the hour, and I want to throw out another reminder to if anyone in the audience has a question, something you want to bring up, this is the time to do so before we have to wrap up. So don't be shy. Feel free to add to this discussion.
Yeah, maybe Nico could share his experience with us because he's very involved in the project from the inside, and he might have also like advice for students that want to launch into refi space. Maybe Nico, you have a few insights for people how you see your experience, and what would you advise to someone that wants to get full time into maybe refi or something linking Web3 and sustainability?
Yeah, I'd just say like leverage the skills you've obtained doing other things. Like for me, that was Web2 social media, but fell down the Web3 rabbit hole and really wanted to have an impact bigger than myself here. And yeah, I was originally locked in to do real estate for the summer, but I was just shooting my shot at a few different crypto companies. I was really wanted to work for a social impact project, and actually, the day I was applying for stuff, I told my girlfriend at the time that I really wanted to work in climate, and kind of just stumbled upon Ecosapiens when I was on Web3.careers, and thankful to Nihar for the opportunity. But I'd just say, yeah, you might be young and I guess, what is the word? No, people might not think you're ready for a role like this, but it's just a matter of confidence and putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Tom, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and since younger generations master more and more the codes of Web2 and social networks, uh, I think they should not be afraid of, as Nico said, leveraging their knowledge and their skills. And we see that people globally in the NFT space, most of them are young. It's not There are not a lot of boomers inside. So, and that's what defines the space. So I think Nico is a prime example of how to launch a career, and to be able to take a calculated risk regarding your career and your life choices. So thank you, Nico, for your insights.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks so much, Tom, for bringing this up. And Nico, maybe in the last couple of minutes, you can also share some of the tips you come up with to how did you manage to grow this community so quickly? Because yeah, your Ecosapiens Twitter is on point. So congrats on that. What are some of the things?
Maybe cutting out a little
Oh,
bit,
geez,
but I think
my
you were asking for.
Twitter got weird.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd just say like be
Yeah, sorry, my
authentic,
Twitter
be
just glitched.
human.
Yeah, share your
Oh, you're good. Yeah, just say have a dedicated person on social media. I think a lot of founders try to run it in their free time and can't necessarily put the time and effort into it. I think it is a full time job, whether you need to be in Twitter spaces or putting content and updates out there and just engaging with the community. I'd just say, like, get somebody full time on social media. Uh, Gen Z people typically are pretty good at social media because they grew up with it. So I think that's, even if it's like an intern, you should have somebody on there full time, whether it's writing threads, putting organic content out there, updating the community. I just say, yeah, have that person.
That was not the question, Nico. The question was, how did you do it by yourself?
I don't know if I can give all that away.
Okay.
I can answer for him. There is like this whole content thing really is a matter of like repetition and trial and error. And so there is like a certain voice that, first of all, like when we brought on Nico, the fact that he built a platform on TikTok with over 1 million followers, like it's it's very clear that it just like he had a systematic process. He may not know how to describe it, Nico. Like you probably don't know how to describe it, but it is a lot of repetition. It's a lot of failure. But there are like certain patterns in how people communicate. There's a certain charisma. There's a certain tone, and there
Yeah,
are
it's
things that people
just
are more likely to click on. It's just
yeah. I think
true.
you should just analyze like bigger brands and just yeah, you sort of have to figure out and game the algorithm and just test and iterate and just keep trying things.
And just be as handsome as Nico is, so it's easy.
Show up to all the
Persistent.
parties. Show up to all the parties, all the events. That's also part of it for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
Woody Allen said that 80% of the success is showing up, so you're right.
Amazing. Lots of really useful tools, and I'm hoping that some of the students and not students in the audience are taking notes on how to get 1 million on TikTok, Twitter, and persistence breaks resistance, as they say. We are at the end of the hour, and I just wanted to say huge thanks to the whole Ecosapiens team, Nihar, Tom, Nico, for coming to and sharing all your insights, and sharing your thoughts about NFTs in the climate space. And I'm just curious to, see where your project goes, and I'm very excited to see the launch. And the artwork, by the way, looks amazing. I just love the whole vibe you have, and the idea behind it is great. So thank you so much for your time. It was a very useful discussion.
Thanks for having us, Maya.
And ask your family for Ecosapiens for Christmas present.
Yep, it's on my list for Santa.